A vernier caliper is used to make very precise measurements. In the case of this Ward's caliper, we can measure up to tenths of a millimeter. We can use a vernier caliper in a variety of different ways. We can measure the outside width of an object or the outside distance of an object or something, a distance between two particular objects. We can use it to measure the inside width. So say you have a hole or a pipe or something whose width you want to measure from the inside. And we can also use it to measure depth. We will probably not be using depth measurements with this vernier caliper in our lab, but it is an option. When we look at the vernier caliper, you'll notice that in the center there's a row of numbers. This is called your main scale. And the main scale is going to give us a whole number value for our width. On the top of the vernier caliper and on the bottom of the vernier caliper are the vernier scales. And the vernier scale that you use is going to depend on what measurement you're taking and the location of the clasps. So if the clasps are on the outside of your object, you're going to use the outside scale. If you set the clasps inside and spread them open inside of an opening, then you're going to have the inside scale. So to use the vernier caliper, this clasp will slide open and close. So you're going to slide it open, place it around your object, and then push it snugly against your object. Now, sometimes we're measuring things that are pretty fragile, so you want to get snug, but you want to be careful with it. You don't want to push it so hard that you break or damage whatever you happen to be measuring. So if we want to measure the outside scale, we're going to use the numbers located on the top vernier scale. To get started, we're going to look for the position of the 0. So this 0 on the vernier scale happens to be lined up almost to 46, just past 45. So we're looking for the closest whole number before it goes over. So in this case, we would be at 45 because we haven't passed 46 yet. Then we're going to use the tenth of a millimeter marks on the vernier scale to help us determine how much farther past the 45 millimeter mark we are. And we're looking for the tenth of a millimeter mark that lines up most closely with something below it. Doesn't matter what it lines up with below, just that it lines up. So if we look at the 0.9 millimeter mark here, you'll notice that that 0.9 millimeter mark lines up almost perfectly with the notch underneath it. So that tells us that our whole number is 45 based on the position of the 0, and our fraction of a millimeter based on the position of the fraction millimeter mark is going to be 9. So 45.9 millimeters total for our width of this cap. We can also use the vernier calipers to measure the inside width. So here I have the clasps inserted inside of this screw top tube and stretched out wide enough to be snug against the inside of this tube. So you'll notice there are some little notches here. You can use those notches to get it right snug up against the edges. And again, you want it snug, but you don't want to break anything. So in this case, we're going to use that inside vernier scale. Again, we're going to use the 0 to tell us our whole number value. So that 0 falls just past 34, so we've got 34 millimeters. And then our tenth of a millimeter marks along the bottom are going to be lined up with something right above it. So here it looks like the 0.6 or the 0.7 millimeter mark are most closely lined up. Sometimes you'll just have to use your judgment. If you're working carefully and reading it carefully, the tenth of a millimeter is not going to be a huge deal for most of our labs, but you do want to make sure that you're doing this carefully. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is 34.7 millimeters for the inside width of this tube. The remaining images are just pictures for you to practice reading the vernier scale. So I'll leave it on the image for just a minute and then put up the correct answer. So if you want to practice it, just go ahead and pause the video. Go ahead and try the scale reading and see how you do. Remember, you'll want to think about if you're taking an outside or an inside measurement. Here's another, the width of a beaker. And finally, a depth. So as I mentioned a minute ago, we probably won't be using the depth measurement, but I just left it on here just to give you practice for the vernier scale. So for this particular caliper, when you measure the depth, you're going to use the outside scale.